welcome back to Green Planet Blue Planet podcast. My name is Julian Guderlei, and today I have Arjuna Ardagh on the show. Arjuna is a teacher and author. He's written, I think, about 9 books at this point. He's talking a lot about his newest book in this episode called Radical Brilliance and the Cycle of Brilliance. If you would love to see the video recording of this episode, make sure to check out Facebook and Green Planet Blue Planet's Facebook channel. Otherwise, just enjoy this episode with me right now. I'll give you a little bit more context about Arjuna first and his book, because I think it deserves kind of a little bit of the context that makes us really dive deep into the presence of new and learning material. Radical Brilliance is based on 420 interviews with extraordinarily brilliant people. Arjuna Ardagh's latest book provides a credible and highly innovative map of how brilliance occurs. And he calls this the brilliance cycle, that shows us that when 4 very different styles of activity repeat in a cyclical fashion in the same life, brilliance is the result. And Arjuna points out that anyone with the right understanding and willingness to make shifts in their lifestyle can basically create those optimal kind of circumstances and environments for innovation and originality to thrive. So without further ado, let's jump right into this episode with Arjuna Ardagh on Green Planet Blue Planet podcast.
Be a conduit of something bigger than the limitations of your mind. It means to be in deep, intuitive resonance with an intelligence raining down on this planet that really needs human beings to make its agenda become actualized. So in that way, by that definition, Albert Einstein was radically brilliant. I mean, his life was not just lived in getting more money and fame for Albert. He became a conduit for this general theory of relativity, which clearly now doesn't belong to him. It's not his property. The general theory of relativity has changed our understanding of everything, and not just in astrophysics. It's changed our understanding. It's allowed for the whole technology, electromagnetic revolution to take place in technology. So, and we could keep going. There are so many people whose lives were given in the service to an evolutionary force that's bigger than anything individual. So that's what I would call brilliance. And what we can see in kind of reverse engineering, when someone opens to that stream, they are on fire. They feel full of an energy that is much bigger than themselves. And very often then relationships and money and health fall into place because your life is being fueled by something so much bigger than yourself. So on that basis, we could ask, well, okay, if that's the golden nugget, if that's what really makes life amazing, what does it take to live like that? What does it take to live in a brilliant way? And investigating that. So after I had this car accident, I was kind of laid up with post-traumatic stress syndrome. Basically, I was just like laying in a bed, just like with like an insect laying on its back with the legs wiggling in the air. And this revealed itself to me like a jigsaw puzzle. So my father was a purist with jigsaw puzzles. My father had this method of doing jigsaw puzzles where you would get the puzzle, but you wouldn't look at the box, right? You would purposefully not look at the box. You would tip the pieces onto the table, put the box away, and then you would put these pieces together in little clusters where you could see they went together, and slowly you would find out what the image is of at the end of the process, you see? And in the same way, during this time of convalescence, really, these little components of brilliance started to emerge. So what we can see when we do reverse engineering is that brilliance is the result of 4 very different movements. Just like physical health, is not about one thing. Physical health is about good elimination, going to the bathroom every day to be healthy, but you also need to eat good food, and those are opposites. Good health requires you to sleep well at night, but if you stayed in bed all day, you wouldn't be healthy. You also need to exercise. So you can see good health is the result of opposite things, which have different metabolic functions, different subjective experience. And when you put these things together, you have a healthy body. In the same way, there are these 4 movements, which you can see have different colors here. And when these coexist, we have the fertile soil for a brilliant life. So let me pause for a minute would this be a good moment to go into the 4 phases of the cycle?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. I love how you're kind of comparing it to like just a healthy living in that sense and the cycle of life and kind of how there's always opposites that kind of coexist. So I'd love to go into those phases and learn a little bit more how this natural state of brilliance really best kind of unleashes.
Great. So we can start off by identifying 4 stations. And although you don't really live in stations, you live in movement. If we understand the stations, we'll see how the movements are between stations. So right up at the top, for those people listening to this on audio, we're thinking of this like a clock with 12, 3, 6, and 9. So at the top, at 12 o'clock, is what we could call moments of awakening. And this simply means any moment when the attention transcends the limits of the mind. So you have a direct experience of spaciousness, limitlessness, infinity, silence, stillness. So that can happen, of course, through spiritual practice, through meditation. It can happen through contact with a teacher, but it can equally happen through great sex, taking psychedelic substances, or through extreme sports. These are all valid portals into spaciousness. So awakening means that you transcend your mind. You're out of your mind. You're in limitless consciousness. And there's a movement now that starts at 12 o'clock that moves through to 3, which is where little impulses of creativity gain in amplitude. So by the time we get to 3 o'clock, you're in full-on creative flow. The juices are flowing through you. If you're a musician, you're jamming together and you're just being played by the music. If you're a dancer, you're being danced. If you're an entrepreneur, the vision of new technology is just coming through you effortlessly. So that's creative flow. And we can talk in a minute about the brain chemicals, the neurotransmitters involved in these different states. So if we go down to 6 o'clock, 6 o'clock is about accomplishment, getting things done, operating successfully within boundaries, meeting deadlines, meeting budgetary restrictions, keeping contracts, keeping your word. So this is all about limitation. 9 o'clock is actually about humility. It's about the recognition of your limitations as a human being and realizing that what you don't know is so much greater than what you do, what you do know. So actually you are highly dependent upon something bigger than your mind in order to operate. So those are 4 stations, but what they actually turn into is 4 movements. So the first movement, so what we actually experience subjectively is the movement, not the station. So the first movement is the movement from stillness to flow. So that means we start to become sensitive to little impulses. We start to pay attention to little impulses of creativity, which can also manifest as little impulses of bliss in your body, little kind of pleasurable pockets in your body, like, and you move into that, you flow into it, you become sensitive to the flow of creative energy. And that builds in intensity through attention, that builds from 12 to 3. The next movement begins at 3. Now remember, 3 we described as a place of creative flow. So one kind of flow, one quality of flow that happens at 3 is called intention. So intention is a creative impulse now projected into the future, right? That's an intention. It's a creative impulse with a future goal attached to it. And that begins the next movement from 3 to 6. The intention set at 3 builds and builds, and you start to get things done. You start to set agreements, make contracts, book a studio if you're a musician, build a factory if you're an entrepreneur. You start to get things done. So by the time we get to 6, we have accomplished things within time. That's a totally different subjective experience than being sensitive to creative impulses. It's about getting things done, holding energy, being accountable. It also, however, requires responsibility. It requires us to make choices and decisions and to be accountable for those decisions. And that actually begins the next movement, because just after 6, when you've accomplished something, it required you to make a choice. And the choice opens us up to what Gregory Bateson, one of the greatest philosophers of the 20th century, what he called the double bind. A double bind is where you are faced with this or that, and whichever one you choose, you're going to regret that you're going to regret something about the choice. Entrepreneurs face double bind all the time, you know, being accountable to your customers and to your workforce and to your shareholders. Sooner or later, you find yourself cringing a little bit because you did something you didn't feel completely
You're
good
in a
about.
double bind situation.
A double bind situation.
I find this really curious, if I may, right there, because I feel like no matter what we choose in life, it will always have
Absolutely.
And a negative repercussion.
Yeah, so that's Gregory Bateson's great insight, that double bind is not just the result of bad luck. Double bind is the result of participation. If you participate fully, you will inevitably face regret, you see. So this takes us now right here on the, where I'm pointing to when I say here, it's like 6:15 on the clock. This takes us to a place of shame, regret, failure, inadequacy. And these are all like emotions we don't like to feel, but it's where you feel like, oh no, I can't believe I did that. Oh, and you may feel it about yourself, that you burned yourself out, or that you were not loyal to your own needs. You may feel it about somebody else, but right after 6 o'clock, you have this feeling of like, of shame. And as we move through that shame, we experience, which is a visceral feeling in your body, we start to experience learning, and we move through the learning into humility. Humility would be where you can forgive yourself, you can forgive other people, you can feel, you know, I'm a limited human being. I did the best I could. I'm well-intentioned. I did the very best I could, but I'm operating within limits. Finally, now we move from 9 to 12, and in a state of absolute humility, you realize I am very limited. I'm very small. There are lots of things I don't know, lots of mistakes I make, but there is something bigger than little me causing all this to happen. And if you turn that inquiry inwards, it becomes awakening. It becomes the recognition of your true nature or your higher self or whatever is infinite. If you turn that inquiry outward into the world, into creation, you start to have an intuition of the divine, of something bigger than human, which is causing all this to happen. And so you're back at 12, back in awakening, and so the cycle continues.
Really cool, really cool. Thanks for laying this out also for everybody listening on the audio, kind of the clockwise motion. So creative impulses, getting things done, then the emotional kind of journey from anything, let's like fear, shame, etc., into humility and somewhat freedom. That then kind of shows you and opens up this place of your true nature, your purposeful nature, the vastness beyond our individual self.
Right, and it's quite interesting to dwell for a moment on the brain chemistry involved, because there's a lot of science behind this. You know, I was able to talk to some of the greatest brain experts in the world, and there was fascinating to see lights going on, you know, on both sides of the conversation. So can we go back through it for a minute and we'll just talk about the brain?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I have a bunch of questions, but let's go back right into it.
Okay. So if we start off at 12 o'clock, these moments of expansive awakening, well, they're characterized first of all by a significant decrease of activity in the default mode network, which means that you're also going to see reduced blood flow to the front part of the brain. So there's significantly reduced activity in the prefrontal cortex. So, and more of an activation of actually a part of the brain which is to do with spatial orientation, and as that gets redirected, we have more of a feeling of boundarylessness, right? So there's a lot of brain science about how you experience infinity. So it's also, from a neurotransmitter point of view, the awakening is associated with high serotonergic activity. So we're seeing predominance of serotonin as a neurotransmitter. As we move around from 12 to 3, there's an interesting dance between serotonin and dopamine. They dance.
And we all love when serotonin and dopamine do their dance. I think this is why people are so kind of hooked into Joseph Campbell's way of putting it, like follow your bliss, right?
Yeah, exactly. So it's interesting because at the beginning you get this has a wonderful correlate with subjective activity. Right after 12 o'clock, you can have very, very, very fine impulses of creativity, just like almost like a melody that you're hearing on the wind from far away. It's very fine, and it produces incredible amount of blissful response in you. So the finest impulses you feel, rather like when you're, if you go to a party and you see a beautiful person and you're single, and you feel a little shudder of pleasure, and that kind of pre-flirting state can be way more ecstatic than like full on having sex, so just these finest impulses. So that indicates a little tiny bit of dopamine, but with very sensitive receptor sites, you see. So a tiny bit of dopamine produces a very strong reaction. Now, so that's basically a lot of serotonin and a little bit of dopamine, but with highly sensitive receptor sites. As we move through towards 3, we get much more dopamine, but much reduced sensitivity. So it's a very interesting thing how that works, that you get more dopamine, but it produces less results. So that would be like, if just after 12 would be the finest impulse of a melody carried on the wind. 3 o'clock would be you're going to a rock concert and you're standing by the speakers and it's like blasting, but it's not having such a ecstatic effect on you anymore. So that's 12. That's 12 to 3, serotonin to dopamine. Now, dopamine, as you know, dopaminergic activity is all to do with novelty. It's like, yeah, let's do this. Wow. It's actually, dopamine is stimulated by using cocaine, where you just feel like invincible. I can do anything. So that's where we have these, we set these intentions, big, ambitious intentions just after 3, and the movement from 12 to 3 is making those intentions real. So now actually we shift a little bit from brain chemistry to biochemistry, because you can see that the hormone testosterone allows a man to push through boundaries and get things done, whereas or maybe rather than saying a man, the hormone testosterone allows the more masculine side of us to get things done by pushing through boundaries, ignoring limitations, and just driving through to the finish, whereas a mixture of oxytocin and estrogen allows the more feminine side of us to build a team, to feel I've got your back, you've got mine. We may not be able to do it alone. We can do it together, and we can trust in the outcome. So all of that is a more feminine style of accomplishment. But either way, as we move, riding on those hormones through to 6 o'clock, as we get closer and closer to the deadline, we see the predominance of noradrenaline, of the neurotransmitter associated very much with adrenaline in the adrenal glands above the kidneys. You see, as you're getting closer to meeting a deadline, you experience this release of noradrenaline that you got to push through, which also creates a dominance of the sympathetic nervous system and a suppression of the parasympathetic nervous system. So which means, if your back is aching, you need to go to the bathroom, you feel tired, your eyes are itchy, you tune all that out to meet the deadline, right? So that's 6 o'clock. Now, when we talked a moment ago that right after 6, you have these feelings of shame and regret and remorse, and you feel like, oh, what have I done? You start to notice all the mistakes you made. Well, that is actually associated biochemically with what's called parasympathetic flooding. Okay, because you've been pushing away all the symptoms from the parasympathetic nervous system. When you finally get the job done, you don't need the sympathetic dominance anymore, and the parasympathetic nervous system floods in, which means suddenly you really need to go to the bathroom. You really have a headache. Suddenly all those things are really strong, and emotionally you really feel sadness, regret, remorse, shame, all the things you were pushing aside. So so as we move now, as the parasympathetic nervous system starts to dominate between 6 and 9, we're moving through to a brain dominated by GABA. And GABA is the brain chemical which allows us to feel relaxed, to feel okay about things. Like, I've done my best, I forgive myself, I forgive you, it's okay to rest, it's okay just to go have a nap now, I can give myself a break. That's all GABA-induced brain activity. But as the brain is drenched in GABA, you rest deeply, you allow yourself a good night's sleep, and it gives the brain the space to create more serotonin and bring us back to 12. So that's the kind of biochemical or neurotransmitter equivalent of the subjective states we were describing.
That's amazing, or brilliant to use the same kind of word out of the lexicon. Arjuna, what I'd love to understand right now, because this cycle is really great in then bringing it to awareness or raising it in awareness. What I'd love to understand is in the daily application of it.
Right.
I mean, I know you're a coach. I know you work lots of one-on-one sessions. How does this look? Maybe for one in your own life, from like getting up in the morning, doing the right things, taking the right supplements, to then also, how does it look in people's lives?
Right. Well, the truth is, actually, I'm glad you asked that. The truth is that everything I've described to you so far, it kind of sounds cool, right? But it's actually completely theoretical. All right. It's just a theory. So
Totally.
far. Okay. Because I mean, although it sounds kind of, great, nobody actually really lives this way. Okay. What in fact happens is blockage because of all kinds of constraints, because of all kinds of limitations of conditioning. We don't really live freely moving 12 to 3, 3 to 6, 6 to 9, 9 to 12. We have different kinds of blockage. Now, we've been able, I work with a group of coaches in developing this. We've been able to identify 4 kinds of blockage, all right? And these are addiction. Addiction means that you start to favor one part of the cycle at the expense of all of the rest of the cycle. So, for example, addiction to 12 would be somebody who thinks that life is about spirituality. Life is about becoming enlightened. Nothing else really matters. That would be addiction to 12. Addiction to 3 would be an artist who says, well, all that matters is to create art, write poetry, paint paintings. Nothing else is important. Addiction to 6 would be a life about accomplishment, manifesting, getting things done, creating results, making money, building a company just for the sake of it. We need economic growth for no other reason than to feel accomplishment. And then 9 o'clock would be an addiction to working on yourself, to kind of self-improvement, going to therapy groups.
Right. There's lots of that as well. I love how in all the examples, I can think of myself in different places of my life or other people where I'm like,
exactly,
totally real. And this is why I love how you outline the full cycle of it, because once we're aware of the theory, we can actually so much easier detect where are we and who can we talk to unblock the blockage.
Exactly. So, right. So 9 o'clock, if you get addicted to 9 o'clock, you get addicted to working on yourself. Now that's addiction. Equally, we can develop judgment. Judgment would be that you develop an attitude of disdain or dismissal to a certain part of the cycle. So for example, a good example, there's a polarity, of course, between 12 and 6. There's polarity all the way around the cycle. So somebody who's really, let's imagine 2 brothers, right? Since you're German by birth, let's make them 2 German brothers, like Wolfgang and Fritz, okay? So they're brothers, they grow up together, they're really in tune, but then Wolfgang, when they finish university, Wolfgang goes off to India. He goes to Rishikesh. He becomes Shri Anandanandaraj Shri Jay, right? And he wears orange robes and beads and, all of that. And so he's just all about meditation. But Fritz goes to work in Deutsche Bank, you see, and makes a lot of money, and he gets into the mortgage department. He drives a Porsche and everything's cool.
There's very different lives between Wolfgang and Fritz right there.
Yeah. So now they meet up, you see. They meet up, and Fritz, the banker, looks at Wolfgang in his robes. He says, "What are you doing? Why are you going to India? What's in India? Is there some kind of business opportunity there? I mean, what are you doing? Why are you just meditating all the time? You're not accomplishing anything." And then Wolfgang, in his robes, he says in a very calm kind of namaste voice, he says, "What are you doing with your life, brother? You're not even a human being. You're a human doing. You're not. You've just given yourself to the corporate machine. There's no spiritual depth in you." So they're in judgment of a part of the cycle. You see, Wolfgang the banker looks at meditation. He goes, "That's a waste of time. It's not accomplishing anything." Whereas Fritz, I forget, I've got them mixed up now. But no, I got that wrong. But
just call him the banker and the meditator.
Yeah. But the meditator looks at a life of accomplishments and making money as a waste of time. Now, there's judgment between 3 and 6, and there's judgment all the way around. There's judgment between 1:30 and 7:30. So anywhere you are in the cycle, you can look at the opposite part and say that's stupid. So that's the second kind of blockage. The third kind of blockage is what we call aspiration resistance. That means that you look a little ahead along the cycle and you go, "Wow, that looks amazing." it looks like somebody pulling a rabbit out of a hat. You know, for example, let's say somebody who's really creative at 3 o'clock, constantly writing, making music, and, you know, wow. And then they look at somebody who's actually built a business and they've got a website and they've got sales, and they go, how did you do that? Like, I just have so many new ideas. I can never actually get all that together. How did you actually finish the book and how did you do that? So a very creative person looks at people who accomplish things and it looks like magic. Equally, you could say somebody who's really busy at 6 o'clock, accomplishing. They look at somebody who goes on vacation at 9 o'clock, who's resting and taking care of themselves and getting massages and getting therapy. And they go, I admire you so much for taking care of yourself. That's so great you do that. I want to go on vacation too soon, like next month. I want to take a break, but it never happens, you see.
Once I get there, I'll do that. Yeah.
So that's aspiration resistance. It happens all around the cycle. And the last form of blockage is called looping, which sadly is all too prevalent today. You know, for example, it used to be, if you think of it like an analogy, a farmer. When I was a child, a farmer was somebody who had geese and pigs and cows and corn growing, and it was all happening in an ecosystem. Today, a farmer grows one kind of crop. It's monocrops, you know, and that's specialization. So looping means that you get really good at one part of the cycle and you just go round and round and round in a tiny little area. So for example, a copy editor would be somebody operating at like 245. They're just going round and round and round copy editing. They're not inhabiting the rest of the cycle, see? So those are 4 kinds of blockage. Now, what's really interesting is all 4 kinds of blockage: addiction, judgment, aspiration resistance, and looping, they all exist in all 4 phases. So you've got 16 flavors of blockage.
Let's jump right into like, how do you unblock and go back into
Exactly.
How does that look?
Yeah,
like
that's great.
Very real. How does it look either for you personally or for those 420 people you interviewed in the process of making the book?
Yeah, well, actually, you know, what's really relevant is how it looks for coaching clients and coaches, because this actually now becomes a coaching method, you see, because when I work with clients and when the coaches who I've trained work with clients, we're mainly working with visionary entrepreneurs who are primarily motivated to make a difference to the world. Okay, so in other words, entrepreneurs who are not primarily thinking how to make money, but entrepreneurs who are willing to make money, but they're primarily thinking, how can I make the greatest possible contribution? So what we see then is we start to develop a context for coaching where we see that people are naturally brilliant. Right? Our clients are naturally brilliant. They don't have to become brilliant. They are brilliant. There's only 2 possibilities. Either I'm humming in that brilliance right now and it's flowing through me and party time, or we can identify one of 16 kinds of blockage. You see, it's very precise that either a client is in a brilliant state, or we can clearly see the symptoms of one of the 16 styles of blockage, and we can apply the right practice. So really, what it means is this becomes a map then for just about anything you can think of which changes your state, right? Any practice that changes your state. For example, meditation changes your state. Going to the gym changes your state. Having sex changes your state. Taking a supplement changes your state. Taking a nap changes your state. Just anything which we can think of as a practice to change your state, it belongs somewhere in this cycle. So we get a really accurate map for the perfect practice to move you through and unblock the cycle.
Very cool. Very cool. So it kind of simplifies the process for you as a coach or for you as a partner to understand, oh, wow, right now you're moving through this part of the cycle and here I can help you, or here I can help you kind of align back to your own inner brilliance.
Yes, exactly.
Very cool. Arjuna, what I'd love to hear, because we have some people commenting on the live video.
Oh, good.
Someone who read your book and he's like, I can't believe it. I just finished the book a day or 2 ago.
Oh, let's shout out to that. So where do I find this? Tell me on Facebook. I'll go look.
On the live itself.
Well, if you just tell me the name on, is it Blue Planet?
Green Planet, Blue Planet, correct, yeah. And then On Green Planet, Blue Planet. But the question was this.
Yeah.
That person loved the Leonard Cohen story and how you
great.
met it. Tell us about it. How did that come to be?
Yeah, well, Leonard Cohen, let me just have, which page is it? Because I just want to get to see the, oh, there it is. Is it Green Planet, Blue Planet Community? Yeah.
It's shared in the community and in the podcast, correct?
Yeah, I'm seeing it. Okay, great. I'm just going to get there so I can look at the comments. Yeah, so Leonard Cohen, in many ways, is a perfect example of what we're talking about here. He lived fully in each of these four quadrants, and you can see it. You can see the little impulses that he just followed obediently. Like, you know, when he said things like, "If it be your will that I sing no more, that my voice be still as it was before." That's where he's fully surrendered to something bigger than himself. He actually did a lot of his own engineering. You know, he was very hands-on with everything to do with his music, also with the concert tours. You know, he designed the lighting, everything. So he was very hands-on from 3 to 6. He very courageously went into feelings of depression and failure and remorse. So he was no stranger to the learning that happens between 6 and 9. And finally, he was an incredible mystic. You know, he spent years in Mount Baldy Monastery on outside of LA in you know, Zen center in meditation. So he was fully immersed in all these phases. So yeah, you wanted to hear the story of how I met him?
Yeah, totally. I love that you're describing Leonard Cohen as a mystic, and I think this is something that is becoming clarity for more and more people. Those who creatively express often connect with their inner divine, often connect with the mystic teachings, or sometimes even initiates in certain lineages of teaching. So I'd love to hear how that came to be.
Yeah. So yeah, sorry, I was trying to dull the sound on the feed. Where do I go find these questions? Because I'd love to see the questions.
I just dropped it for you in the comments in the chat.
Right.
Here
I got it. Okay, cool. Got it. Yeah. Oh wow, it's a big link. Okay, there we go. Now I'm going to see
technology, you guys. This is what it takes. You have to have a Zoom account to publish on Facebook, and then meet awesome people like Arjuna.
Okay, it's Ryan Schwartz. Hey, Ryan, it's cool. Yeah. Yeah. So basically, I really wanted to. This was a long time ago. This was 2005. I really wanted to. Well, it's earlier than that. I really wanted to interview Leonard for my book Translucent Revolution, which came out in 2005. So I was in touch with his manager, Kelly Lynch. And she was always saying, "Oh, now he's in Montreal. Now he's on retreat. Now he's this. Now he's..." I could never actually set up an interview with Leonard Cohen. So finally, I just gave up, and I put other stuff in the book, like I quoted from other interviews. And then suddenly, out of the blue, I get this email from this young woman called Kateri, and she's saying, you know, Leonard would love to meet you anytime, you know, just come on down. And she was very accommodating. And she said, you know, she would email me at 2 o'clock in the night. And then she would email me 8 o'clock on a Sunday morning. Like it seemed, and then if I emailed her back, she would reply right away. She was like as available as anybody could be. Crazy. So she set it up. She said, "You can go meet Leonard." And she gave me the address, and I flew down to LA, rented a car, and I went to meet Leonard Cohen. So we had a great time. You know, we talked for like 3 hours, and that's it. That's in the book. Most of what we talked about. We talked about brilliance, about how things flow through you, and you're not really doing anything. And finally, towards the end of our meeting, he said, "You know, let me show you around." So he gave me a tour of his apartment, which literally took about 35 seconds because the place was so small. You could kind of, you know, just spin around and touch all the walls. It was like a really small apartment. He lived very, very modestly. So at one point he opened a door and he said, "This is the office," right? And in the office, there were these tables you buy like at Walmart, you know, that are like big plastic table with legs that fold down like a picnic table.
Right.
And on this table was stacked boxes. And he said, "This is the office." And I said, "Really?" I said, "Well, where does Kateri work?" And he said, Kateri, let me introduce you to Kateri. Now, one thing I didn't mention that I'm not proud of, but I've got to admit it anyway, is I actually got a little flirty with Kateri. During our interchanges with his email, I was kind of, it was getting a little saucy there. Although I was married and I didn't really know about her, it was getting a little kind of familiar,
Well, you were just about to see Leonard Cohen, so you were getting all happy. I get it.
Yeah, anyway, but it was a little bit like, I was saying like, wow, where could I get an assistant like you? And she'd say like, oh, you should be so lucky. And, anyway, it was just like it got a little flirty. So anyway, he's let me introduce you to Kateri. So now I start to get really embarrassed because I've been flirting with Kateri and now I'm going to meet her, So he takes me into the kitchen and above the sink, there's a cabinet, that you have high on the wall. He opens the cabinet and he points to the top shelf. There's a little statue of a Native American woman. And he says, that's Kateri. And I looked at the ground in embarrassment because I realized what had happened was when Kelly Lynch, his previous manager, had defrauded him of all his money, right? He was left with nothing. And so he couldn't afford to hire a new assistant. So he made up this person called Kateri as a kind of.
He was flirting with you.
So I was actually flirting with Leonard Cohen. Yes. That's right. Right.
That is wonderful. That's very refreshing. Thank you, Arjuna, for sharing that. I very much love hearing small anecdotes like that.
Yeah.
I have 2 or 3 more questions for you, and
Great.
one of them comes back to the topic of meditation, and you have, I think, like a whole chapter dedicated to like how to sit.
Yeah.
And I know that a lot of people are not fans of like the classic kind of style of meditation with a mantra and a pillow. So tell us a little bit more about how to sit in a way that really works.
Yeah, well, thank you for that. I actually prefer to not even use the word meditation at all, because it gets people scared. It's like, meditation, that's really difficult. So the thing about sitting is, anybody can sit, right? Your dog can sit, a child, anybody can sit. It's not difficult to sit. If you can stand up, it's even easier to sit, right? You can sit on a chair, you can sit cross-legged, anybody can sit. People can walk, they can lay down, and they can sit. So sitting's easy. So my kind of suggestion to my clients is to go buy a good quality sleep mask or blindfold. I like the one from Tempur. You can get it on Amazon for $30. And when you put it on, it's made of kind of velvety material. So it doesn't, there's padding around it. So it completely blocks the light, but you can open or close your eyes. Doesn't matter if your eyes are open or closed. So I suggest people just put on this sleep mask, set the timer on your phone for 30 minutes, and then simply sit. You don't have to do anything more than simply sit. And then it's really, the rest is not up to you. Maybe your mind is going to be very active. Maybe it's more quiet. It makes no difference. Maybe you're going to have, irritated, disturbed emotions. Maybe you're going to feel a lot of love and peace. It doesn't matter. The important thing is that simply by sitting and waiting, if you sit and wait, the doing, including the doing that would try and change the mind, the doing just relaxes on its own because you're just sitting. And in relaxing, the quality of awareness itself starts to emerge, you see? The quality of that which is aware. And when I say that which is aware, it is equally that which is aware of irritated thoughts, and it's equally that which is aware of peaceful, loving thoughts. It's the same. There's no difference. It's the same awareness which observes all different qualities of the mind. And so what happens then, instead of trying to make your mind peaceful, which is very difficult, or instead of trying to have only loving emotions, which is very difficult, you simply relax into observing what is there. And in observing, we release the perfume of true awakening, which is simply to recognize the nature of consciousness itself.
Beautiful. I love how this is congruent with the more theoretical approach behind you on the wall, because if you're just trying to cleanse your mind of bad thoughts or just feel loving emotions, you're not in a cycle of what it means to be human, right?
Yeah.
And I think this is where a lot of people that I hear you on being afraid of meditating or being triggered into thinking what it is, very nice to simplify and to just sit, observe, and kind of tap into.
Right. So what I've just described, incidentally, just observing, that would be like an 11:45 practice. It's a practice that easily can flip you into moments of awakening.
Very cool. Arjuna, who did you write this book for? Like, who would you say should definitely read Radical Brilliance?
Yeah, I think, it's really, the book is really written for people who feel a calling to make a difference. This book is not about how to get rich quick. The book is not about how to become famous, particularly. The book is not really about the usual desire mechanism that we easily get hooked into. The book is really about the components necessary, the lifestyle necessary to make an incredible difference to the world. And actually, of all the interviews I did, the one that stands out most and that is in the penultimate chapter of the book is with Lynne Twist, who years ago founded the Hunger Project, but then 20 years ago founded the Pachamama Alliance. And her life, her entire life, every moment of her life has been given in service. It's amazing. I mean, she raised $2.2 billion to alleviate world hunger. She has by now put millions of acres in the Amazon rainforest into permanent land trust so it can never be disturbed. Incredible service. She's totally dedicated. But she says in the book, she says this incredible thing. She says, people think that it's a sacrifice to live this way, that you have to give things up. But she said, there's no sacrifice at all. You give up nothing that was really of any value, and you get everything. And it's really true that when you make your life about contribution and service, you are rewarded in a way that you could never have imagined. And everything you thought you wanted through desire is given to you it's given to you as a byproduct of service. And that's really who the book is for. If you come to the point where you realize the emptiness and the futility of just trying to get more money for me, or better sex for me, or a bigger house for me, or a yacht for me, when you realize the futility of being obsessed with your own desires and needs, and you feel the inspiration to make a difference, whether it's a global difference or a local difference, when you come to that point, this book is it's certainly the intention of the book is to give you everything you need to live a life of incredible depth and meaning and purpose and contribution.
Beautiful. I have one last question for you, Arjuna, and that goes very much along the line of contribution, being in service, also intention, and like let me bring it very much into this like now moment, like from your place of heart. What is the change that you really dream to catalyze with your work, and how would that tie into a larger kind of earth vision as a collective?
What I've noticed, Julian, in so many ways, in so many dimensions, is I can have my intentions and my dreams of what I think should be. And if I can relax and let go and open myself, what is actually possible is so much more than anything I could dream of, And I see that, I can think about my coaching practice, and sometimes I can have these thoughts, what kind of clients I want, but the people I end up getting to work with are so much more. And life is always so much more than what I can imagine. So it comes back to that statement from John Lennon, life is what happens when we're busy making other plans, And so for me, I feel like there is a huge intelligence, and we don't know it directly, but sometimes we experience it in each other. You can see when that huge intelligence has really taken over a human being, the human being has put themselves aside a little bit, so this vast intelligence has room to breathe. And it's humorous, and it's resourceful, and it thinks outside the box, and it does things in new ways. So really, I would say any vision I could have of the future of humanity, the future of the world, is going to be limited by the constraints of my mind. However, we could say it in a broader way, and we could say the vision I have for humanity, the hope I have for humanity, is that we can more and more relax and allow that great force to have its way with us, to work through us, that we can become less about me and more about who we become when we are unified in our surrender to a greater intelligence. And then what's possible out of that is completely beyond our capacity to imagine. It's just so much. Then it becomes magical. It becomes a surprise. It becomes a delight, and that's really beyond. That's beyond manifesting personally. That's surrendering to the great force that makes butterfly wings beautiful and makes flowers and trees beautiful. Whatever that is so much more intelligent and creative than the limited human mind. So I would say the greatest possible vision for humanity is that we relax our sense of personal doing and recognize that we can be danced instead of the need to dance.
Thank you. Wow, that's radically brilliant. I love how you're putting that. Arjuna, thank you so much for taking the time, for being on Green Planet, Blue Planet podcast, and for sharing about your book, about the journey of how it came to be. Is there anything else you would love to share?
Well, yeah, maybe. As we're talking today, at this point in time in history, just yesterday, Michael Cohen entered his plea, his guilty plea, and Paul Manafort was convicted on 8 out of 18 counts, and still the craziness is going on, and it's easy to give up hope. It's easy to feel like, oh my God, the world is just spinning out of control in so many crazy ways. And to feel hopeless. But I think that the note we could finish on is it's always been times of chaos and breakdown where new paradigms of order emerge, And if you look at that in the life of a chrysalis becoming a butterfly, there's actually this very chaotic and kind of disgusting sort of gorging. Really, the state of a chrysalis just before it develops, it looks like diseased, and out of that comes the butterfly. And I think it's important to understand that when you look at the news, if you just get into the usual conversation about what's going on, everything looks very pessimistic. But this is actually this field of chaos is the perfect soil for new paradigms to emerge. And they are emerging, actually, probably more with your generation than mine. They are emerging, and we are seeing brilliant, innovative technologies, brilliant, innovative new social structures, brilliant new innovative ways of thinking about relationship and child rearing and everything. We are really seeing out of the dying and the crashing down of the old me-based, greed-based paradigm. We are seeing radical brilliance emerging all the time, and it's a fantastic time to make yourself available for that.
Beautiful. The imaginal cells of the butterfly rising. Thank you, Arjuna.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's been an honor to be with you. Thank you.
Thank you. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Green Planet, Blue Planet podcast. Make sure to follow the podcast on Facebook and YouTube. Check us out either on iTunes or Spotify or wherever you love to listen to this kind of information. My name is Julian Guderlei. Wherever you are in the world, have yourself a stellar day.